Hello and welcome to our next session, the next creator economy, which I'm personally, as a member of the old media, am very excited about this conversation, which is all about new media. We are going to be focusing on starting with digital media as having dramatically changed film and music over the past decade, empowering people from all corners of society to become newfound creators. Meanwhile, social media allows creative output to the world, with nearly 4.6 billion social media users, and with a few seconds of time, anyone can be a creator. And the world is on the verge of a profound creative enlightenment. So, here to answer all of the questions, including how is new media changing the face of culture in this decade and what will be the future of creativity, I have a marvelous panel here. We have Mohammed Bindayel, who is the CEO of the Cultural Development Fund. We have Dr. Mark Rachesky, who is the founder and chief investment officer of MHR Management Fund and the chairman of Lionsgate Entertainment. We also have Her Excellency Dr. Jomana Al-Rashed, CEO of SRMG. We have Aryeh Bourkoff, who is the founder and CEO of Liontree. And last but not least, we have Keighran, CEO of Caffeine. So I'm going to start with Mohammed and ask you, how is new media affecting the creator economy?
Thank you for the question, Suzanne. I'm very happy to be here with the esteemed colleagues. Simply said, new media, the individual creator and consumer has more power than ever before. And media has never been more decentralized. The creator economy is valued at around $100 billion, 50 million creators worldwide. This represents a massive business opportunity. Let's say, for instance, the music industry. Artists can create content on the many platforms available. And what's most important is that there's no barriers to entry. They can create this content on their platform of choice and monetize this content. For filmmakers, regional filmmakers, for instance, they can create content, use basically the global platforms that are available to them. This would not have happened without the new media platforms that are available. And this is really very important for regional players because areas of the world that don't have strong distribution channels, this is providing them this distribution channel. The streaming platforms available today are more than ever creating or monetizing regional players, not just regionally, but globally. And streaming platforms, if you look at most surveys, have become the platform of choice for many consumers. Enabling, or new media is enabling the communication of cultural identity, creative expression, and individuality.
Streaming platforms.
Yes. So I have a streaming platform based in the United States. But what I wanted to chime in on is you mentioned $100 billion is the sort of content creator pool. But just 24 months ago, it was around $10 billion. So it's just growing exponentially, the opportunity in this area for streaming platforms like mine, but also creators across all of these different social and online platforms. It's absolutely incredible, the growth.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I also, we got, I guess, into film, and how we ended up into streaming also is back in the 90s, I had bought 90% of Marvel Entertainment's dead at 45 cents on the dollar. And it was an interesting business back then. They had a kind of a declining comic book business. They had a toy business that was completely unpredictable, but they had 4,700 characters, including characters we all know, such as Spider-Man, X-Men, Iron Man, Fantastic Four, Captain America. So I was a very early believer in the value of content. And what was interesting is we're making our investment in Marvel, and lo and behold, a character that some of us who are older in the room might remember called Frosty the Snowman was sold for $20 million. So at the time, we realized we had found a diamond in the desert. And if you take that and bring it forward, 2009, Marvel gets sold to Disney for $4 billion. And then if you look since then, I would say Disney has probably made at the box office $20 billion on those characters. So that view in content led me to Lionsgate, which had 10,000 titles. And what's interesting is your distribution mode will change over time, but your content is what powers the engine. And it makes me think there's a film 35 years ago called Dirty Dancing. Mm-hmm. We license that title today at 2.5 times what we licensed it for 5 years ago, which is kind of miraculous. Today, we'll sell to 250 different potential buyers of our IP. 10 years ago, I'd say that would be 10 or 15 people. And then we quickly realized also, as part of the content stream, is you have to get close to the consumer. So we bought an over-the-top platform called Stars, where when we bought that, 4 or 5 years ago, it had about 900,000 over-the-top subs. Today, we're close to 30 million subs. So, but then again, content is the driver. Content has been, my thesis. And if you look at Lionsgate today, we have 17,000 titles. When we first got involved, we had 10,000 titles.
So content is your thesis. Has your thesis evolved as the industry has evolved, the digital media changing the landscape?
Well, I think it's important to realize that kind of the creator and the studio need to be symbiotic. So there's many different models, and we have the ability to either do a cost-plus model and make sure the talent gets paid on that basis, or we can do it on a royalty rate basis where it's elongated, and we have the ability to put them in TV, put them in film, put them on Stars, and it's just a powerful platform in that regard.
Speaking of monetizing, Aryeh, how can these next generation of creators actually monetize their work?
Well, thank you also for having me, and you can tell that I brought a modern take on our culture here, given that we are talking about a dynamic economy and the creator economy, and things are always evolving, and we are looking forward to the Vision 2030. In the media business, things are always changing, and the creator economy, even if it's a $100 billion economy today, is constantly evolving, but it does have some hallmarks, which is the quality has to rise to the top, but the opportunity is there. And what I would say is changing about the creator economy are three things, and it starts with the companies versus the creators. So upwards of 50% of marketing budgets from companies today are now going towards social media platforms versus traditional sources. Like it used to have budgets going to advertising into magazines or newspapers or broadcast television. Now 50% are going to social media platforms. So in spite of Jamie's comments earlier yesterday, it is a real thing, social media, and they're more than just bots on there, and it is something that is a platform that has tremendous reach that creators can monetize. So that is something that has real dollars flowing. The second thing is there is more collaboration of product and tool sets between companies and brands and creators that have to be more collaborative. It's not simply pushing out those dollars into brands and into creators to then produce them independently. There's much more collaboration. That's really what this Adobe Figma deal was about, which is a $20 billion transaction, where you could call that the first big creator economy merger, a $20 billion merger. And the third thing is speed. You used to now have taglines for brands that lasted a decade or 5 years or 3 years. Now the speed by which brands are being tagged is constantly evolving, because creators are making their own taglines all the time, and companies have to catch up. and therefore pick up more speed in strategy. And probably, you know, as I mentioned, a lot of people are calling themselves creators, and there are 20 million Americans that now call themselves creators in the economy that make about $100,000 or more per year. There's one notable one called Mr. Beast that monetizes on YouTube that has about 170 million followers on YouTube and about $50 million of cash flow that he produces, and also does give back some cash flow to other monetary and purposeful causes. Recently got an offer, according to him, of $1 billion to buy the platform. And so the creator economy at its peak is $1 billion per person. So you are seeing massive successes, and I would just add with that comes a lot of responsibility, because creators as individuals do have a voice now and have a certain amount of responsibility for things that they say as well. And we've seen that recently, and I think that word responsibility is going to be getting more and more attention, in addition to the monetary potential for the creator economy.
Jomana, off the back of that, with technology literally at our fingertips, how can people become digital creators with minimal training?
I believe that technology is the great equalizer. It provides opportunities. It means that people can tell their stories. At the end of the day, you know, we're talking about the monetization of content and how you can enter the creator economy. The streaming platforms have facilitated that. They live and thrive on user-generated content, and that's where the technology comes in. However, it's also about determination. It's also about commitment. It's also about identifying the right story that can reach audiences internationally, be it through traditional media or new media. It's the story that matters. Content is king, and distribution, of course, supports the traveling of this content. And that's why we find it a real opportunity to tap into this talent that's being promoted through the creator economy, through the streaming platforms. There are several cases here in Saudi Arabia that have shined through the streaming platforms, such as YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat. I mean, I'll give 3 examples: Thamania, Tilfaz, and Mercot. Thamania was created 8 years ago as a startup by young Saudi talent leveraging audio content, and were acquired by the group last year at a very high valuation. Mercot and Tilfaz have several deals with Netflix to create local feature films, and I would say 10 to 15 films in 1 year alone. So it's, for us, technology is simply a facilitator, it's an enabler, and will support the talent to reach higher horizons.
So I'm hearing content, but what is the relationship between content and following? I ask this because I recently personally had a conversation with a high-level executive at an organization that I'm not going to call out right now, who said, your content is great, but what really matters is your following. Is that true? Do you all agree with that or disagree with that?
I think it goes hand in hand. For your following to be good and to be high, you've got to be producing content that can be consumed. Ultimately, content creators have identified what the consumer wants and where they want it and how they want to consume it. So it's a hand-in-hand relationship. I don't think you can have a high follower base without having good content.
I think Ben has thoughts.
Yes, I think it really depends on the platform, right? So, you know, with a lot of social media platforms these days, Instagram, Twitter, one of the challenges is that it's very much pay to play. Even if you have a huge following, you can't actually reach everybody that is following you. The algorithm kind of restricts actually how many people you can actually reach, certainly as you get to a certain scale, depending on how much you post and what's best for the platform. And so understanding kind of which platform you're on and kind of what the mechanics are around reaching those audiences, but also how you're going to monetize on those platforms is important as well. If you take something like YouTube, there's a whole playbook around how to get into the YouTube algorithm and how to get subs and monetization on there. On the Asian live streaming platforms such as YY, Douyu, Huya, tipping is actually a primary way of monetizing on those platforms. 70% of the revenue actually comes from sort of gamification and in-app purchase on those platforms. They have advertising and subscription as well, but they see like $78 per average paying user per quarter, which is very, very high. And 70% of that is coming from this sort of gamification. And so as a creator, looking at the different platforms, the different monetization options, which I feel like are coming out more and more and more so, driving up the growth of the overall total addressable market, and some of the metrics that you shared earlier are all signs of great opportunity for creators. But the best advice I could give them is to really understand the platform and what's going to succeed on there, and really design and lead in to that with your content.
So I want to bring it back to film, particularly Mohammed and Mark. Is this new media environment better for filmmakers?
Absolutely. I mean, if you'd like to answer first, or so we at the Cultural Development Fund look at value creators. As a financial enabler, we look at value in enabling these value creators. So we have many products and services, financial and advisory, to enable these value creators. With creators all over the world, living and thriving off of, as Mr. Bourkoff has indicated, living and thriving off of new media. This is a really great, massive business opportunity for us, especially here in Saudi. We have a population of around 34 million. 80% are active social media users. And so this grew a lot during the pandemic, but we have a massive also youth demographic. With this massive youth demographic, new media creation will only grow more, and this resonates deeply with us at the Cultural Development Fund. We believe in enabling digital creators as much as we can, and this will enable a truly diverse cultural infrastructure.
I'm a strong believer that as these different distribution channels for creators gets expanded, what it does is it increases the value of your content, because there's different ways to put on your content. And I just think of our TV business. We have 100 scripted and unscripted shows that are on many, many different mediums, when a while back that wouldn't be possible. So your whole world just expands. And now we're building production facilities. Now we have in Dubai a theme park that we're part of, and we have a whole Lionsgate part of that. But for film per se, it just increases how we and where we can put that film and content over different windows.
So if distribution methods are becoming more consumer-facing, I'd like Aryeh to answer this one. What is the continued role for the studio?
Well, I think, first of all, I mean, the creator economy has a general flavor to it, but you're getting into film and studio. I think it's very different from the music industry, which is probably further along with respect to the creator economy, because artists on platforms like Spotify do take risk on the platform, and I think now about 5% of music is driven by the creator economy, or about $1 billion, and it's constantly evolving, and it's probably easier to produce content on musical platforms than it is in film. The reason is because when Mark, as chairman of Lionsgate, greenlights a film with John Feldheimer, the management team, they take all the risk. The actors are not taking any risk. And so there's not really alignment yet between the artists and creators that actually are doing the acting and the content, even the writers, with the financial reward. So until you actually have full alignment with the creators and the potential profits and risk, you're not going to have an unleashing of the creator economy. And so therefore, the control of the studio and the control of the distribution is really much in the hands of the people that are funding the hundreds of millions of dollars of capital required on the front end. Over time, that's going to evolve, similar to what happened with music, and then you're going to have tool sets and other ways to create content. I think AI is also going to help that, and trying to figure out and package what people will want to watch, and that will produce content. But that's part of one of the reasons why the streaming platforms are requiring so much capital every year to feed the consumer, is because scripted content is very expensive. I think Netflix spends almost $20 billion a year on that content. and they compete with Disney and Amazon and Apple, et cetera. So whether it's studio content or streaming content in script land and film and television, it is an expensive game, and the artists don't take the risk. I think that will unlock over time and then become more of a cheaper, shared alignment strategy, just like it is in music.
So there are two buzzwords that I keep hearing, and one is decentralization and the other is AI. Do both or either of these put any of your efforts and ventures at risk?
We are personally heavily investing AI in the future of technology and also the future of data. We now know that any sort of content that has to be created in the future has to be empowered by data and has to be empowered and leveraging AI. It's just the trajectory and the natural progression of media consumption and media creation as well. And we live in a tech-savvy society. Internet penetration in Saudi Arabia is at 98%. As Mohammed was saying, the majority of the population, 70% of the population, is under the age of 35. These are tech-savvy. These are digital-first content creators. Therefore, as publishers, as media creators, as supporters of the platforms, we have to be very much supportive and leading and pioneering on AI technology.
So on the note of decentralization and with brands becoming decentralized, what is the role of the influencer in the digital creator economy?
I think it's an issue that we've had to deal with over the past 5 to 10 years with the growth and expansion of influencers in the creator economy, especially with the shift of advertising from traditional platforms to the influencers and marketplaces. However, we have very quickly learned how to adapt and leverage that influence and leverage that follower basis. And we also had to very quickly penetrate and adapt to the social media platforms. I think looking at the creator economy, traditional forms of media were creating content for their platforms. However, the creators were able to leverage much bigger reach that the traditional platforms didn't necessarily have. So it's a relationship that is now being utilized, and there's a marriage between the quote-unquote influencers, be it news influencers or content creators or subject matter experts, and the traditional or new media platforms.
But it doesn't really, Ben and I were talking about this backstage, it doesn't necessarily benefit these platforms to build up these influencers, right? Because what is the benefit?
Well, there's different levels of content creators, right? So there's organizations, there's influencers, there's people that are just, getting started. There's also many different levels of content creation. We talked about the studio just a moment ago. I mean, you've now got effectively a studio in your pocket, right? As well as something that, could be a physical bricks and mortar place in Los Angeles, just like we have with Caffeine. There's many sort of varying degrees of this. And then there's also many different viewing experiences for this as well. So in live broadcasting for like live sporting events, which is what we do, you have very high engagement. People watch for hours basically plugged into it. And then these short form sort of video platforms present completely different levels of content creation much quicker, both on the content creation side as well as the viewership side. I think that back to your influencer question, it's really like, is this a full-time career for somebody? Is this just something that they're having fun with on the weekends? Kind of what role are they sort of playing in the sort of content creation ecosystem? The good news is there's more opportunities than ever for platforms, for creators of all levels, and it's an exciting time. And when you take a big step back, some of the biggest sort of industries in the world is like entertainment, healthcare, and transportation. And if you're doing something really big and exciting in any of those areas, there's huge business opportunities. For entertainment, live streaming platforms, short form video, the change in how people are creating, consuming, and paying for content is all in the process of changing things like AI, decentralization, all creating new opportunities. And so, I think just influencers are a part of that ecosystem and need to understand the changes and the opportunities that are coming with that.
So we're very data-driven and AI-driven. So I agree with Aryeh how on the movie side, it's a lot more expensive when you build these streaming platforms than on the music side. But what really helps us tremendously is the data we can collect on who's watching, how long are they watching, what are they watching, as we continue to create more product for our different streaming platforms.
I think another buzzword that belongs in this family is sustainability. And people expect sustainability in pretty much everything. So what does that mean for the creator economy? How does the creator economy stay sustainable? I suppose each of you can answer that question from a different angle. So let's start.
I think structure. When a person wants to start some type of business, any type of business, you have to look at it in terms of structure. How you build this business, what type of business you want to market, how you want to market yourself. I know there's a lot of creators that are individual that want to come out with their own brand, but unless you structure what you want to do moving forward, it's very difficult for you to sustain it. And I think more than likely a lot of the creators in online have learned through the process. And so the ones that have been weeded out weren't structured enough, and the ones that were able to structure themselves were able to thrive and move on in that business.
I think of simplistically sequels. So for instance, I have another Hunger Games coming out a year from now. I have another John Wick coming out in March. I have another Now You See Me coming out. And we even have another Dirty Dancing coming out a year and a half from now, even though it was made 35 years ago. So that's the sustainability in keeping these titles alive, vibrant.
For us, it's innovation, and it's also investing in growth and investing in the right talent. This is how you remain relevant, and this is how you maintain sustainability. Constantly innovating your products, constantly innovating with new ideas, constantly exploring with new ideas, and most important of all, enabling the creator, supporting the creator to create a product that can live and reach different audiences.
You know, there's an expression in our business, you're only as good as your latest deal. In the creator economy, you're only as good as your latest creation. You have to keep creating to sustain in one sense. So that goes back to my speed comment. You pick up a lot of speed once you're in the creator economy. It's not enough to do Dirty Dancing 35 years ago and then 35 years later. In the creator economy, which is great for the Lionsgate business because it's about quality and obviously the anticipation of that is palpable. But I think for the creator economy, you have to keep creating. And then I think it was talked about the other day of what does this new generation and this younger generation stand for? And I think that word is authenticity. In this creator economy, you have to really be authentic. You can't fake it. Your true colors are out there, and there's your vulnerability and your expression, and you have to really want the attention, not necessarily just to be loved, but you have to put it out there. And it's not for all of us, but for the new generation, it's about authenticity. And with that, frankly, comes more work to be done on the concept of disagreement, because we've hit a brick wall in that concept. But I think the authenticity card is what allows you to sustain that creation.
I think people are spending more money than ever on entertainment, and I think even as we move into periods like 2023, recession, inflation, people will still be spending on entertainment, especially micropayments. It's a cheap way to spend time and really engage. There's more opportunity than ever. I think everything you just said, Aryeh, is absolutely true for the creator. It has to be fresh, it has to be authentic. But I also think there's a lot of change in the platforms and the content people are interested in. And so I would be looking at what is the next generation engaging with the most and be spending time now. We've seen over the last 2 decades shift from broadcast to OTT. We've seen new streaming platforms now, short form video obviously taking people taking a tremendous interest in that. TikTok is the classic example there. And so really figuring out what are the new ways to create, consume, and monetize, and leaning into those new opportunities, I think, is where people should be looking.
Yeah, I mean, the algorithm is here to stay. The machine learning is here to stay. There's definitely a spark of human creativity that's always going to be behind it, but that's what TikTok's figured out. But the short form YouTube that Ben referenced, and frankly, the Caffeine platform is the same, is part of it. But it's very important to know the secret sauce of the creator economy, because the model has flipped, is if you have the creation of content at the forefront, the spin-off of that are brands, products that then can be outsourced. Like in my Mr. Beast example, he's creating the content, but then chocolate is being created as a brand that he's outsourcing, and then having joint ventures and splitting revenue, and that flywheel keeps on going. And then you hit the real enterprise value of the creator economy build. But it used to be you create the brand and you outsource the content creation. Now you're creating the content and outsourcing the brand and product creation. And that is an inverted strategy, but the content creation is at the forefront.
Speaking of secret sauce, Mark promised to give us the secret sauce backstage to Lionsgate's success in the creator economy.
Well, by far, as I said before, it's content. Early bleeding content, grow your content. My focus, continue to grow my content. At Lionsgate, we're probably the last bastion of true, large, independent content. But it's the power of what we do, and the word authenticity is spot on, because by how we do it and what we do, you have the ability to tell your story. And that's why this is really important for FII and the conference here, is because as you continue to grow your culture, you have your ability to produce and tell your story.
Absolutely.
And I think that's critical and important.
So I host a series for BBC called Women Building Peace, and I wanted to know where you see women in the future of the creator economy. Whoever wants to take it first. Maybe not the woman on the panel. You can go next.
I'll take
Aryeh?
it from a Saudi perspective.
Okay.
I don't think you need to differentiate. I think women and our men are equal on that term. And they, in terms of the creative economy, you can even say women are more advanced than men in the creator economy. So there would be no differentiation.
But are women in high-level roles? Ben and I were talking about this backstage. Are women in high-level roles in each of the positions and directions that you come from?
Have you downloaded the Taylor Swift new album, Midnights? I mean, it's broke and crashed Spotify, right? I mean, that is a creator economy product right off the bat. And the question is whether she will be enhanced or replaced by an AI version of Taylor Swift, which was an article that came out this week about being able to replicate some of those lyrics in a different way. But I agree with Mohammed that I think it's the democratization. It gets pushed to the forefront when you talk about the creator economy, and I think that the platforms itself that exist that give you direct access to a global audience is what allows for that. That's where the opportunity really is that you do have the platforms that are not ring-fenced or providing gateways to that. And I commend the Crown Prince here, because it's one thing to have a young generation, but to take risk and bet on it on top of that is a whole other level of risk-taking that is paying off and is to be commended, because to do that in a democratized way that is gender neutral and obviously full of equality and opportunity is why we're here.
I think the creator economy has also allowed for more inclusivity and representation, which traditional forms of media didn't allow for in the past. And I completely agree with Mohammed and Aryeh. There's no differentiation on the creator economy. It's the content that you create. It's made everyone equal on these platforms. And as Aryeh said, the next competition or competitor to the current content creators is probably going to be AI-led technology. But the creator economy has been provided a lot of benefits, I believe, to the conversation between gender or representation overall globally.
The thing I was going to add was that I think one of the things that has helped, that has sort of held probably women creators as well as a more diverse range of creators back over the years is, the first kind of generation of social media was, hey, let's connect everybody in the world, and we did that. But in doing that, forgot a lot about sort of the moderation and how to create really safe spaces for people to put themselves out there. And so I've seen in these different platforms in the last 10 years, a lot of people starting to really lean into how can we enable a space that everybody can participate and create and be successful.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for this fascinating panel, and we look forward to more content. I guess I'm one of the creators on this panel, so I suppose I should deliver. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.